Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to CvCISO podcast number 69. My name's Andy. I'm your host today, and we have with us the founder of FR Secure, Evan Francine, executive director of Security Studio Academy, Dave Tuckman, and last but not least, he puts the down in Jordan, the treasurer of the Minnesota CvCISO chapter. He makes TikTok videos from his car, Jordan Money Darlington. And today we have a distinguished member of the CvCISO community joining us, James Keltgen. He is the Director of Information Technology at Rochester Public Utilities, as well as an adjunct professor at South Central College.
And he's ripped. He is. In case you didn't know, I mean, I don't know if he'll take his shirt off during this podcast, but he can climb
a
radio,
right?
Yeah.
Be too embarrassing for the rest of us.
No,
we're not going there.
Tough to go on after that, but the next CvCISO cohort begins January the 5th. The last one just started. We've got 18 very bright individuals in there that are guaranteed to be successful. 11/6, we have a first-time collaboration between FR Secure and Security Studio Academy. It's an online presentation on the secrets to building a CvCISO practice. Get your tickets now. Feel free to hit me up. There's some discounts available. That's about it. Who'd like to start us off?
Thank you, Andy. That was a fantastic introduction. I feel more important. I feel like I'm more important now than I was before I started this.
Well, I stopped calling you the great. I know you asked me to do that. So
God, right? That's a lot of pressure, brother.
Should we call him average?
Well, slightly above average, please.
Oh man, I like
just slightly above. I know that's a subjective term. If we were to quantify it, I don't know. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm like a 5.2. Average being 5.
All right, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's about where I sit. Yeah. I try to set the bar really low for other people.
Set the bar low.
I
appreciate that.
5 kids. And I think some of us are fathers here. Like, I just always wanted my kids to be better than I was. And the good thing about my kids, I set the bar really low for them. They exceeded that at my first felony was at the age of 14. And so 3 of them didn't get their first felony till they were 15. So there you go.
There you go. There it is. I was just watching a Steve Harvey clip last night where he kind of said that your dad is the only person that wants you to be better than them.
I think a good father, that's true. It should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, sadly, you see some of those narcissistic fathers, and that don't want that, that feel threatened when their kids are better than they are, but that's a whole nother story. Andy, what are we talking about today? What's our big topic? And I'm super happy that
we are going to get into James and his story with a whole bunch of stuff.
That's what we do. We talk about stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That teed that up perfectly. Yeah.
Definitely.
Set the bar low. You never disappoint.
There you go.
Good to know.
Unless you're doing limbo, then that's horrible.
Ooh.
Set the bar low.
Good point.
I knew someone was going to get deep, but
I taught my wife not to be disappointed by me. It took a long time. I kept drilling into her, stop having expectations of me. Stop. No expectations. 0. You cannot be disappointed with me if you have 0 expectations.
I always tell my wife that there's a reacher and a settler in every relationship. Yeah. And, I always say then thank you for settling for me.
Exactly. Yep. See, there's some marriage advice in here where it's not all about information security all the time.
Getting deep today.
It's about risk management.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. So, all right. So James is here. He's going to talk to us about, do you have an incident you're going to talk to us about?
Yeah. So, and I don't even remember, like I said, it kind of got, washed from my mind, to be blunt on it, the incident that we happened to have. But yeah, we had an incident that occurred, I want to say about 2 months ago now. It was an interesting one because there was some pre-positioning, there was some then the actual action occurred. And of course, going through that wonderful incident response and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah, so this is kind of an incident that happened. It was there's no BS in any of this because of course it's legitimately occurred. And, I think the whole big piece that I have on it is, and when I actually met with the CvCISO group, when we chatted about it was, I was underneath this a couple of days after, the post-grief process of, whether or not, hey, the incident happened, we beat him, right? It occurred and we beat him, we kicked him out and all that kind of stuff. And then on the flip side though, is like, well, did we? So I was kind of in this weird dichotomy of hey, yeah, we won, we got him, we beat him, but did we? Crap. Now I was kind of underneath that guise of I'm going to keep looking, just to be on the safe side. No forensics was enough for me. And really, like when I met with the group, that's kind of the state that I was in. Was that I've been looking and searching and trying to, flip over every rock that I could to find this adversary was still there or not. And now looking back at it in hindsight, I couldn't find anything. We couldn't find anything. We had our SOC and everybody involved and couldn't find anything. But yeah, the incident was one of those wake up call kind of moments. And of course, that changed like every time an incident happens, of course, you go in and look at your incident response plan, review everything. It's part of a good post process, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of a fun one.
Walk us through it.
Walk us through it. Start it.
Thanks for reigniting that fire.
Yeah,
Jeez,
yeah. We'd like to take
I
this
thought we were all
opportunity
friends
to have
here. You weren't going to like bring back the bad memories.
I'll send you
But
some
there's
sleeping
something
pills.
really interesting in what, in the way you talked about that. People's default is it happens to other people. People's default is it doesn't, it's not going to happen to me. And I think that's the reason why less than, 50% of organizations have an incident response plan, because they still have this. It's just human nature to think, well, that's not going to happen to me. Or if it does happen to me, we talked, I think last week about, there was an executive who essentially said, well, I think we're smart enough to be able to handle that. We're good. It's like, are you? I mean, I've been through a lot of incident responses over the years, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. So let me ask you this, James, was this the first incident that you've been through, or one of the first? Just take me through that. Okay.
No, and to along those same lines though, right? Every incident is different. I wasn't going to go under the guise of, that I was so pompous enough to say that, yeah, we got it. We got this nailed down. When something occurs, we're going to be ready to rock and roll, because every incident is different, because the people involved are different. The adversary is different, the psychological behavior of the team and the staff, that I was working with is different. Right. So, even though you think you got a pretty good handle on things, it's usually enough anytime one occurs to kind of jostle you just a little bit, right? Just shake it up a little bit, where you're like, oh, we're going to go back to the incident response plan. We're going to refine these things. We're going to do additional training. We're, focused on what actually occurred. And I think that's really the big gain from this is, there's always lessons learned that come out of these. Just like when you do an emergency drill, you go back and refine the plan. And the whole idea is you're never going to encapsulate and be able to take care of everything at a moment's notice. There's no silver bullet to it whatsoever. But to be prepared and to be cognizant that it's going to change is also important too.
Are you able to walk us through kind of like how it started and what triggered some of that this could be different?
Yeah, that's a good point, Dave, because we know that the name of the game, especially as CvCISOs, is not to eliminate risk, right? That's not even possible. So we manage risk. Where we can, we try to prevent bad things from happening. Where we can't prevent bad things from happening, what do we have in place to detect the bad thing that happened? And so that's our input into any incident response plan, is some detection mechanism, whether it be a human being who calls us, sees something unusual, whether it be an alert on some console somewhere. So for this one, to build off of what Dave was saying, what was the input? How did you know?
Yeah. Well, okay. So truth is the first thing so there was, like I mentioned to you, there was some pre-positioning that occurred with this particular adversary. So I don't think at that time that we knew, right? Like I think there's, how do you know, right? It's not necessarily black and white. But there was some pre-positioning that happened that kind of, elevated some, people's eyes and interests and, hey, something's a little off. So I will say that before this incident occurred, when we officially knew, the day before, we had a few staff members. In this case, it was a smaller subset. So this is, the typical stuff where the adversary went out on LinkedIn and found people's titles, all that kind of fun jazz. And then, of course, said, hey, we're going to target these individuals. So the day before, they had actually sent spam messages, basically like, 10 messages a minute to these like 4 or 5 individuals. And those spam messages, we had 2 individuals come to us saying, hey, I'm getting this. My phone is just going, it's buzzing like crazy with all these new messages coming in. And so, we kind of go into the guise of like, okay, you're probably on someone's list, somebody signed you up for something, et cetera, because that's sort of typical that happens. And we couldn't build a filter to reduce these because they were all coming from different senders, different IP addresses, different mailboxes, different subjects, different all over the place. and they were happening at a pretty high clip. And then, for lack of a better word, magically, they just stopped, disappeared. We were using Exchange Online. So some got filtered, but not all of them did, right? Because they were coming in at a pretty good clip for these. But these two individuals that kind of had mentioned that, and we're like, well, we can't help you. We might have to just ride this out. Think of it as like a DDoS type solution, right? But that was really the pre-positioning. That was what this adversary was doing. Then the following day, they used Microsoft Teams to call and impersonate the IT help desk. So they called up these individuals and basically said, hey, I'm from the, and they gave a couple different names. And of course, none of those names were people actually on our IT help desk. But in this particular case, they said, hey, we saw you guys are getting, that you got a bunch of spam messages. I can sign into your computer and help you out to put a filter in place. Well, we had one individual who's a relatively new employee, hasn't really gone through some of the cybersecurity training. And to be blunt, they're just trying to get their ball rolling. Their career is just starting, so think about it from like the sociological aspect. They just want to help and be helpful, all that kind of stuff. Well, they actually signed into this individual's computer, and interestingly enough, they tried running their scripts, and of course, our antivirus kicked them out initially. So then 30 minutes later, they call back to do it again. And in this case, they had already modified their scripts to know which antivirus was already in place so that it could shut down the processes and actually go through and technically infiltrate the computer. And part of that was, once it had infiltrated the computer and we'd done the forensics analysis, all that kind of fun stuff, it basically did a bunch of reconnaissance. It tried to query AD, it tried to find, certain files, folders, shares, things along those lines throughout the. At that same time, we had two individuals who came and said, yeah, I got a call from somebody named, I can't remember what the name was off the top of my head. Like, that's not quite right. That person doesn't even work here. So these are more seasoned employees. They already know who people are on the IT help desk, all that kind of jazz. And that was the crap moment. Hey, we're getting attacked at this point.
But you're saying, I mean, cut you off, but you're saying that the adversary was sophisticated enough to have done open source to know who the target was, be able to contact them and create the dynamic of the situation to create the ruse that they were there to help.
Yeah. So they created the problem, and then they came in as hey, I'm the solution. And what is interesting about it is this all happened simultaneously. So this was not, a one-off person, I'm going to call this person first, this person next, this person next. These individuals all got called at the same time.
Yeah. This is AI. This isn't an AI agent.
This is nation state level crap, unfortunately, is what it's. And interestingly enough, I did produce a timeline for this and all this kind of fun stuff. And about 30 minutes after this occurred, we got a notification from a federal partner effectively saying, hey, just so you know, this is happening out on a lot of other federal entities. And it's like, yep, that's exactly what happened, but you're 30 minutes too late. But yeah, so like this incident occurred. It was pretty bold. Some of our cybersecurity people were like, initial actions were like, hey, I went and, we ended up talking with all of these individuals that we knew of the day before, and we like disconnected their computers immediately. Like there was no rhyme, reason. I mean, we're going to stop this dead in its tracks as fast as we possibly can to get containment.
So as soon as those individuals reported to you that they were getting called, is that when you engaged your incident response plan? You said, okay, this is happening. And so how did, well, one question I have is, so you have an incident response plan.
Indeed.
And is it one that, have you guys done like tabletops on it? Like, was it one that you guys had practiced?
Yeah. So we've actually done oddly enough, so I've only been with the organization since February, actually. And so one of the things I've done is actually introduce tabletops on a much more frequent basis. So we were able to kind of drill for this.
Mm-hmm.
Not the exact scenario. Like I said, it's never ideal. It doesn't match exactly what a previous scenario was, but we were able to kind of drill for this and effectively activate really fast, which is really the saving grace. Yeah, they got into this individual's computer, and this went on for about 45 minutes, kind of a thing, where the initial one got kicked out. Then they came back again for the same person, and then was able to get through. Once our incident response plan, once we knew something was going on, it was kind of all hands on deck. Like I said, connected computers, separated things out, segmented and contained as much as we possibly could. And at that point, then, in your incident response plan, you can kind of start going through the forensics aspects. How did it get in? Where did it come from? What was involved? Things along those lines. Who do we have to notify? Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So, I mean, really, the whole incident, like I said, it was and if you've ever been in an incident, you know that it's kind of you plan for them, but you don't expect them.
Sure.
Right? So what you had planned for that day probably is not going to happen, right? That just goes out the window.
It's like that scene from The Office. It's happening.
Yeah, it's like this is the rapture. We're all going to die now, kind of a deal. But yeah, that was kind of the gist of it. It's like, like I said, once the guards were up, once things started kind of getting disconnected, once we had kind of containment, then we could focus on the forensics aspect, notify, and again, we were notifying all employees through multiple channels, et cetera. That kind of thing too, which is actually a really good one, by the way. If you don't have that in your incident response plan, have an outside the current communication medium, like a different way to notify employees. That's not just email, because no offense, your email might be affected. So find an alternate way. That was a good lessons learned out of this whole deal. But yeah, we went down the forensics route. We had log files, we had all that kind of fun stuff. So it was actually fun for me in a weird way. I must be somewhat jaded, but it was fun to me to start digging through some of these things, how the stuff got implanted on the disk, all that kind of fun stuff, and really go through the forensics aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. I mean, like if you use like that sports analogy where the adversary was just that prepared and that efficient and that ready to execute for the whole plan. And really what you had going for you was that you were ready to respond.
We were ready to respond. We were not like we sit and wait and twiddle our thumbs for stuff like this. However, when you're dealing with, like an adversary like this,
sure,
when they initially get into a computer and the computer AV basically kicks them out, but they have the next solution in place to kill that AD in less than 30 minutes. That's some pretty advanced stuff. And I know that the time frame is getting smaller and smaller. The windows are getting shorter and shorter. That's somebody who's not just prepared, but they're ready. Their actions are adversarial. They're full on red team. They're gonna rock and roll.
Yeah, they're ready to pivot.
Yeah,
in the thick of it.
Well, and it shows. So, like the biggest thing you can do with incident response is situational awareness. It's the biggest thing in all of information security. It's not that it's not that you're sitting around waiting for things to happen, but I'm paying attention to what I'm doing in the environment that I'm operating in. Right. So it's when you notice that your computer is running a little bit slower than it was running before, or there's a pop-up there that hasn't been there before. Those were unusual things. Computers only do what you tell them to do. So things happen on your computer because something told it to happen. So it was great that you had a couple of those employees early on who noticed something that was different, something that was unusual, something that's not in the normal situation, to then do something about it. Right. Can't emphasize enough how important it is throughout an organization and at home or on the streets for your own personal safety, your kids' safety. I mean, it's all related to situational awareness, paying attention.
And we totally, after this all occurred, and like I said, the dust settled, all that kind of fun stuff. We did that. We created, and I know this is going to sound kind of counterintuitive and dumb, but in our phishing messages, we hand out Swedish fish for people who identify, like little packets of Swedish fish for who identifies actual emails that were from our phishing system, right? We did the same thing with these individuals too. Like I went out on Amazon and bought a couple like Yeti mugs that say, I graduated cybersecurity, and handed it to these people who came to us, with this information. Because the whole thing for me is like, in order to make a cybersecurity aware culture win, you got to celebrate some of these positives. Like, it's got to be a positive thing. It can't be, oh, you got the spam email or phishing email wrong. Here's some more training. It's like, no, don't do that. Like, you got to be positive about it. Yeah. So the culture of the organization has fundamentally changed in so many months now. And, I'm actually really proud of that, because yeah, they're willing to tell us these things. We make it an open environment for people to have these discussions, which is stuff that you kind of learn through that CvCISO course. You want to be able to create that kind of environment where, hey, we can talk about risk. We can jive about this. We can see what's good, what's not, what we need to do, what we shouldn't do, and just have open communication about it through the entire organization, the whole thing.
The end of the day, right? We're just a collection of people, and But every single one of us is a person that we question, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, what's in it for me? How does this affect me personally? And I think when you can make it personal by rewarding people, because people, I mean, psychologically, they only do things if there's pain or there's a reward, right? So it's like the fact that there's something good, but then, you know, on the pain side, because these things, when you talk about what's in it for me, like these are life skills, believe it or not. Information security, being aware of your environment, isn't something that's specific to cybersecurity. It's not something that's specific to the high tech people. It's everything. And the sad thing is, when you walk down the street and you see people with their heads buried in their phone or, you know, whatever, they're missing on the situation that they're in. If I was an attacker, because you have, you know, over the years, you kind of have an attacker mindset in order to protect people. And you walk down the street, you're like, oh my God, it would be so easy to pickpocket that person. It would both be so easy to assault that person. It'd be so easy to take her purse. But it's those same skills of situationally aware in a physical environment that you take to an electronic environment. That's why these are life skills. It's not like, I mean, sadly, I think it's great that you were in a good position where you have, and you're in a pretty highly regulated environment where I think, and it's highly targeted, right? Especially from nation state, you know, attackers. But, you know, from the money motivated attackers, you know, they always go after the highest return on their investment, the lowest hanging fruit. It's the ones that aren't paying attention. They're not going to spend their time going through this kind of attack here where they're actually going to build attack profiles on specific individuals and targets and whatever, and then execute on that. That's more sophisticated. If your team, I think, if your organization would have had the situational awareness of what most organizations have, you'd be screwed.
Yeah.
I mean, you really would be.
You know, crime is just, you know, I always, having worked in the kind of the law enforcement sector a little bit too at the county level, you know, all it takes is, you know, basically the right person with the right mindset, and then all they need is an opportunity. So that's that, you know, finding somebody who could be pickpocketed really easy. And I think actually like security people tend to be a little, I don't know, maybe is psychotic the right word, but you know, it's kind of one of those where you have like, you know, you understand the threat and you can see it actively. Like if you're talking physical security, you're walking around even on your daily basis and you're looking at a door like, oh, those hinges are on the wrong side. You just have to pull the pins and the door was open. You know, you kind of have that, you know, how something happens and you know, but you go into the like kind of more defensive mode of, hey, how do I prevent that from happening? Do I mention something to this person? Do I say, hey, by the way, if you were to change the hinges on that door, it'd be more secure? You know, so we're constantly doing that. It's just a function of what we do. I think just kind of knowing those things.
But the trick is for us is we need to get other people to think like this. It's not paranoia, right? I don't walk around. If anything, I get more peace out of being situationally aware, whereas other people are driven, you know, when an incident occurs, there's emotion, high emotions, fear, frustration, anger, oh my God, you know, whatever. Whereas I think somebody who's more situationally aware, there's no fear. You know, and people need to do it because it's funny we're talking about this because I was writing a personal incident response plan, actually updating my own. And I was telling somebody this earlier this week and they're like, you have a personal incident response plan? I'm like, yeah, I do. They're like, why? I'm like, because I get targeted all the time. I've had my identity stolen, I don't know, 5-6 times. I've had my bank accounts, you know, compromised a dozen times. In the situation that I'm in, it makes perfect sense for me to have a personal incident response plan. Well, and they're like, well, you're like an expert. Why do you need it? I'm like, what if I'm not there? What's my wife going to do? And yes, we do tabletop exercises. Does that make me weird? I don't think it does because I have so much more peace in my day to day that I go through my day and I'm like, I'm not worried if you attack my shit.
I think it's a great idea. I'm not laughing because of it. It does. We are psychotic, James, but it's in a good way.
It's a good way. Mention that, Evan, because I remember the line of paranoia is perfect awareness. And so, you know,
I don't know why more people wouldn't do this.
Yeah, I don't mean it negatively in any way, but it is that it ties into that situational awareness.
I think too that, like, you know, I find that I can be in kind of a bubble too. You know, I hang out with and rub elbows with a lot of information security experts, right? Like you find fellows, and so like I hear all this stuff, and then I leave that bubble, and I sometimes walk around thinking, well, of course all these people know this, but they're not hanging out in the same, like just even when you bring up like rewarding the people rather than punishing them in your phishing simulations and training and stuff like that, because I still to this day will have people that are trying to build their training program, and there's a lot of like negative around, like, oh, we'll have to give them more training or else, and if they do it again, they're fired. And I'm like, really? Because that's the bubble I'm in. That's not really the approach. So, but it's out there, and you forget sometimes that these people need to be told. So, like, going back to what you said, like, should I tell them about it? Yeah, man, we got to be telling people because they don't know. They're not in the bubble we are.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing too, man. I'm on information security, above average. My job is not to protect you. It's not. I can't. My job is not to choose how much risk you're going to accept and what you're going to do with the unacceptable risks. I can't do that stuff, right? Especially at home. I'm responsible for my house. I'm responsible for my family. I'm responsible for my assets. I'm responsible for my accounts. This is how I protect it. If you decide not to, then so be it. But I think you should. I really do. It's not hard work. It's not like, oh my God, creating a personal incident response plan is, who the hell does that? It takes like 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really good for your family. When you sit down with your wife, it's good for my marriage. When I sit down with my wife and we talk through scenarios and we talk about things that aren't just part of normal everyday discussions. And that same thing applies to work, right? If you approach this with the right attitude, it's a fantastic opportunity to get to know other parts of the organization that you had no idea even existed, where you get to talk through, like, what would we do if this happened? I'm not saying it's going to, and we don't have to be fearful that it will, but what would we do? I think, I don't know why people don't. It's a life skill, man. That's why it just freaks me out, or it doesn't freak me out. It sort of pisses me off, I think, that people go through life without some contingency plan. But I guess when you think about it too, I mean, how many people go through life without purpose? I guess maybe, I don't know. I'll share my personal incident response plan with you if you want it.
Well, they actually kind of laugh at that because, this is where it gets deep and we probably go off the rails. So, Andy, if you need to move us back on the rails, just say so. But like, I was actually chatting about it with my wife, right? And we're like, oh, we really need to do our will, we have kids, all that kind of fun stuff. And I'll be damned if I'm not just putting it off all the time. So I wonder a little bit if it's because we deal with risk in our roles so much that when we go home, we don't want to even think about it.
Yep,
but
there's that.
Much to your point, I need to, I have to, I should. Why am I putting it off? I don't know.
Yeah, that there is that switch or that line, that crosses between what you're doing and then what happens after work, at home.
We're actually talking about estate planning too. And the lawyer, it's crazy because she's like, every time we talk about like, well, she's afraid to say like, you died. I'm like, why? So I had to stop her. I'm like, I'm going to die. Let's just get that off. Everybody, you're going to fucking die. My wife's going to die. We're all going to die. So let's just get over that emotional thing. What are we going to do when I do die? And as we're going through the planning, they're like, well, what do you want for this? I'm like, it doesn't matter what I want. I'm dead. Ask the one that's still here. What do you want, Marlis? Where do you want the assets to go and everything? Because I don't give a shit. I just don't want to leave you in a spot where you're like, oh, I wish he would have done this. I wish he would have done that. He put me in a lurch. He never gave me the master password or where I could find the master password to get into our accounts. I mean, it's just, and I think it's well worth it. I think it helps us also, like, look at the positive things that you get from building an incident response plan in an organization. You get an opportunity to educate. You get an opportunity to help people become more aware. You get an opportunity to understand how the business operates more than you did before. You get an opportunity to align information security things, initiatives with the purpose and the mission of the organization in ways that you couldn't before. I mean, there's just like so many positives to building an incident response plan. I think if more people knew that, I think more people would embrace it.
Well, and what is the statement? I can't remember the exact quote or whatever, but it's like never let a good emergency or never let a good emergency go to waste kind of a thing, right? You come out of this and it's like, all right, now we're going to use this as a catalyst for our information security training. We're going to use this as a catalyst for, hey, let's all selectively get better at this. Let's all become more aware. Maybe not necessarily walking with our heads in our phones, but like looking around, seeing the environment, seeing those things. So yeah, I mean, there are pros that come out of it too.
Yeah.
I think they're all pros, man. Unless you do it wrong, unless you're talking about the fear-driven bullshit.
Yeah, fear mongering has no place in cybersecurity, and maybe that's my own personal vendetta at that. You had talked about kind of some of the stuff that kind of drives you nuts. That's one that drives me nuts is the fear-based approach to awareness and cybersecurity and everything else. It's like when I see that, it just makes my blood boil inside. Oh, that's the way I look at it too.
Well,
It's
imagine
like,
if
don't scare people into security. No.
Evan used fear for that personal incident response.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said, imagine if you used fear
Oh, yeah.
for your personal incident response plan. Where would that take you?
Like discussion ends at that point.
The worst decisions you can make, not just an incident response, but in life, right? Apply this to everything.
Mm-hmm.
The worst decisions you can make are ones with shitty context or ones that are driven by emotion. So in an incident response, you've got two of those things already stacked up against you. If you didn't plan for the incident response, you have no context because you never planned for it. You don't know where this fits with that and everything else. So having that incident response plan helps to give you context. It also drives down the emotion. So those are two strikes for you on making shitty choices.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that same thing applies to like life stuff.
Yeah. I have an example of that. Like it's just, you guys are making me think. Well, first, I wanted to share that I told my wife that we should do some tabletop exercises, and so we did yoga on the kitchen table.
Yeah, that's a good one. I do that.
So I had to get that
on the
out.
table.
It was like bouncing around my brain. I'm like, I gotta at least say that.
You got to start with the coffee table, though, man. That kitchen table, that's pretty high up there.
I could have gotten dirtier with that joke, but I wanted to keep it clean for our audience. What I wanted to say is, and this is very professional of me, but I think that like we need to own this responsibility as an information security professional. We should be setting the example for people. And talking about context, like here's a failure on my part. My son wanted to get involved with like Roblox, and there's there's a lot of reasons not to. There's a lot of information security failures that Roblox has as an organization and whatever, and other dangerous things about it. And I let him because another parent had let him. And so I thought that parent vetted this, and so I was like, oh, they're doing it. I'm sure they vetted it. Sure. And I wasn't thinking, of course they let their kid do it because I let them. And so you got all these people, all these parents just thinking, oh, well, if they're doing it, they must have vetted it, and nobody vetted it. and so that's the context. I'm just like, oh, gee. And that's when I was like, dude, I got to be better. Like people look to me when they know if I'm in information security, like I got to be better at being an example. And, and that's in my personal life. Like this is close to home. That's that inner circle. And I dropped the ball.
Lessons learned, man. That's the last step in your incident response plan. So just take that, wrap that back in, and you'll be better prepared next time.
Yeah. And that falls under that umbrella of situational awareness.
Right.
Just another.
Yeah. I don't know. And as a social engineer, some of us are trained social engineers. Like the easiest way to engineer somebody is to get them emotional.
Mm-hmm.
You can get them to do all kinds of crazy things. So not only are you going to make shitty decisions during the incident itself, but you might be opening yourself up to additional attack, just being highly emotional.
Social engineering is rooted in sociology. So, you think about how people's emotions can effectively regulate things and change their own behaviors. I mean, especially even when you start talking like, hey, here's our incident response plan. This is what's going to happen. But along those same lines, like in the incident that I had, we had that incident response plan. We had everything kind of moduled off, all that kind of fun stuff. What actually happened? People put on their hero capes immediately to jump into the situation. Like, we're going to take this offline. We're going to do this. It's like, whoa, hold up. Do we even know we have an incident? Let's validate that part for, So the sociology is that, yeah, you can have these plans, but people will still do things that might deviate from whatever that plan happens to be. And I was guilty of it too, because what did I do? I went right into this particular incident, so here's, this is me telling you my truth. I went into this incident. I'm like, okay, we got an incident response plan, we're doing the right things. We're going to start containing it, all this kind of stuff. In the meantime, what was my role in an incident response plan? Notifying the rest of the staff. Went right down the path of, I want to do, more intrinsically motivating, interesting work, forensics work, finding where the adversary came in, how it happened, blocking things, all that kind of jazz. What was my one role? My one role in that whole plan was to notify staff and to be that liaison between the two. And I didn't do it.
Yeah,
I had somebody else do that, and it wasn't until that post process that I came into this thing.
that you realized.
Yeah, it's like, dang it, I went right down. I'm just as guilty as everybody else.
That's why I love the lessons learned piece at the end, because there's not, in all the instances I've been in and been a part of, not once has there not been something that I could have done better. Every single time, and it's the plan is there for a purpose. And sometimes, following the plan, sometimes the plan's not good. I think a lot of people get stuck with like this perfection out of the gate. Like let's say this is your first incident response plan that you've ever adopted at the organization. And what's been keeping you back is maybe, lots of motivators for why you may not have done it yet. But what would you expect your first incident response plan to be? It's going to suck. I don't give a shit how much time and effort you put into it. It's going to suck because it's your first one. It's a maturing process, right? But it's better than no plan. And then version 2 of your incident response plan, being that you've been through the incident once, you're better. I mean, it's just like this growing thing. And then eventually you get to the point where, you're in pretty good shape for 99% of the incidents that you might encounter. But it just takes time. The worst thing to do is if you don't do anything, the problem just continues to exacerbate and get worse. So at some point, you're going to have to take the bad medicine.
Sorry, I got to drop for another meeting. So
Me too.
You guys keep going. This is great. And James, thank you. We'll have you again. But you guys keep going if you like.
Peace, guys.
See you guys.
Bye.
Wow, they're leaving us, just us.
This is really dangerous. Where was the risk assessment on leaving us 3?
I
And
know.
don't get me wrong. Unlike Jordan and Evan, I'm trying to grow the beard. I'm trying. So we're gonna get there eventually.
Take some time. Well, the more
What do you
incidents
guys
you
really
go through,
think of Dave and Andy?
it's like Play-Doh, where you put pressure on the Play-Doh and it comes out the holes. So the more pressure you get. So just do a few more incidents and then you'll start growing that beard.
Yeah. Well, that would explain why there's no more hair on the top of my head anymore.
Yeah, it comes from
Exactly. It's all in there.
In my
So what was the biggest, we'll start getting, because I think a lot of times when people listen to, especially information security or tech people, when they hear about people talking about an incident response, they want the technical details, right? They want to like, oh yeah, I want to see how cool this was and everything. Most of the time, that's, in my opinion, that's a waste of time, because the specific incident that you went through is only going to apply to others that are being targeted by a similar attacker. Now you work in a niche industry, so I'm guessing 99% of all the people that are listening to this podcast are not in the same industry that you're in and will not encounter the same TTPs. So TTPs are the processes, right? It's the attack scenario that took place. So I didn't really want to get into the technical details, but what I'd like to know is, what were some of the biggest lessons learned? As you got through that, what were some of the things you're like, that you think other people would benefit from?
Totally. No, that's a great question. And there were so many kind of lessons learned once we kind of got through it. But some of the big ones are in this particular case, because it came in, the adversary came in via a Teams voice call, right? So we think about how we use Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Discord or whatever, kind of as a chat or whatever that mechanism happens to be. It came in via a Teams call, and it didn't have like a typical Teams call. It didn't have the person's face, or it said, if I recall correctly, I think it came in as like IT assistants. That was like the first name, last name of the thing. And of course, they introduced themselves as these individuals that we don't even have on staff. So the lesson learned was, hey, know who your people are. And we think about that as organizations, we used to be kind of, coupled underneath a single office, right? Everybody used to come in and you got to know one another. In this case, it's like, hey, know who your IT folks are, who can you ask for help? So if somebody comes in with a different name, you're like, well, who the hell is that? Again, they created the problem that they came in to solve, right? They sent all those spam emails and then called the day after. And I think that window is shortening, right? Like next time this might happen, God forbid, right? But next time this might happen, they might send a bunch of emails, and then the second after it kind of goes away, they'll come in as the help desk, right? So we won't have as much time to kind of sort of get our bearings a little bit around this scenario. So the thing is that the adversaries are getting better at it. The time is actually decreasing from, pre-positioning to actual execution to the full fallout and everything else. So really, like the lessons learned I had is like when you look at an incident response plan, the biggest piece I have is be sure you communicate with all the rest of your staff that something's going on that we're going to try to contain, because the other ththings that I had lesson learned was, of course, my general manager was like right at the door, like, hey, what's going on? Where are we at? What's happening? Where did you find him? It's like those things actually don't necessarily matter. Keeping him informed matters, right? But do we know who it is? No, we're never going to know who it is at this point. So you have to kind of get some of that context of what's really truly important. One, are we containing it? Or what's actually happening? That kind of stuff. Those are those things that matter. Like, how can we continue business? How can business continue to keep moving ahead?
I think that you made a great point earlier about how, the person that kind of fell for it was new, and so understanding that your new employees will get are vulnerable, and making sure that they do get training as fast as possible, but just being aware of that, your new people, like you got a vulnerability until you can get them trained up and comfortable reporting the red flags. Cause I'm sure there was a red flag that went off in the person's head, but just didn't really pay attention to it. Didn't maybe know where to go to talk about it.
Yeah. That's a good point too. I like how you brought out the communication. Cause that's a big thing that often takes incident response off the rails is emotions do. So having the right leadership, somebody that can use logic to steer things, through when you've got the incident. But another thing that often derails is communications, and I've always thought, I've learned over the years, there's two communication flows that you have to be aware of. One's the internal communication flow and one's the external communication flow. Should somebody call from the outside or law enforcement gets, whatever, right? So, and every time you have to communicate with somebody, you're taking away from containment or identification or other things that need to be done tactically. And I've had like you, God bless them, having the CEO or the CIO or the, executives at your door. Like, where are we at? What's going on? That's very, very distracting. You know what I mean? Every time I have to answer that question, if I'm doing something tactically, right, it draws from me trying to contain this thing to telling you that I'm trying to contain this thing. And so in an incident response, as you continue to get more mature with your communication flows in an incident response, executive management knows what to expect in terms of communication. They get a communication rhythm of, let's say, every 30 minutes, they get an update, or every hour they get an update, or whatever that flow is going to be, so that you're not at my door. Come to my door if you didn't get the communication in the rhythm that you were supposed to get it, to see if something else went off the rails. But that's why I always like in larger incidents, when you got the team to, I think, afford it, having a scribe, you see a lot of times people forget about that until you need it. But what a scribe would do is there's a rule that if you're going too fast to document everything, you're going too fast. And so the scribe is essentially the documenter. So that when you bring somebody else into your incident response who hasn't been there from the beginning, isn't part of the core team or whatever, and you need to bring them up to speed, we don't have to stop all the progress for me to tell you what it is to get up to speed. Here, just read this, right? But that also feeds into the communication for the internal, maybe with the executives as well. But yeah, there's lots of things. And I'm always find it intriguing because, like you said when we started, James, there's no two incidents are the same, for sure. But there are common threads and processes. And that's the things that you need to capture in your incident response plan. We use playbooks typically for the one-off things, right? But I love it, man, because you're also somebody that I respect a lot. And I know that you're a very logical, pragmatic thinker, which makes you perfect for leading incident responses. Some people just don't got that.
Well,
no matter what, you can't put them in that role because they're too damn emotional. They're too frantic.
Yeah. And you did hit at a really good point, actually, which is that after effect. Once we went through the post process, our incident response piece, we started putting in effectively like communication templates. So to think about incident response plan, a really good one is defining roles within those incident response plans. Somebody's going to be a scribe. Somebody's going to be the external communicator, whether that's vetting it through your cyber insurance provider, your legal team, things along those lines. But at least have some of those roles defined so that you can slot people into them, right? Because I think another big piece that does happen, like I said, everybody jumps at an incident. They all go into, like I said, they put on their capes and go into hero mode. And then they forget that, hey, we missed the communications role. we missed this little piece, right? So there's all those little things that, you get better at as it gets more and more. And I think the other big one really is on the post side, at least for me anyways, is when is enough enough? Like how much more forensics am I going to keep doing? How many more computers am I going to keep going through? I've got validations from, third party vendors, things along those lines that, yeah, everything appears to be good. There's no more lateral movement, but when is enough enough? When you can kind of quote unquote declare an incident over? That is a question that I've never, frankly, in my career, I've never found that there's been any training to say, hey, this incident occurs and you did your incident response plan, but when is the incident actually over? There isn't a clear definition of what that actually is, because that's why you see the memes about CISOs and stuff like that never sleep, not only because all the incidents are happening all the time, but because they're always continually still dealing with whatever the previous incident was. It never leaves their memory. It never leaves the battle scars are there, and they carry them with them. So I think that's a big piece too, is like, okay, you have to be mature enough to say, okay, this incident is over. Let's wrap it up. Let's put the piece in place. Let's call it a day. That we'll move on to the next one. And I think that's where a lot of the burnout comes in the cybersecurity community, is that, yeah, the incidents keep happening, but they never end either. And by that, I mean, the incident that you're working on never has a definitive stop date. We carry them with us all the time. And so I think that's an important piece for, wrapping up this whole kind of thing. We don't have that. We don't have that definitive date to what that actually is. So yeah, I'm still looking for it. Am I still going to find any breadcrumbs, lateral movement, things along those lines? Or are those other incidents that I'm just starting to investigate and look down too?
Do you think there's a feeling of like if the executives are wanting to know, like they want you to sign off, that are they out? Like you tell me they are out. And it's like, if my answer is, I think so, is that good enough? Like now you feel this pressure to be like, I have to tell them they're out. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's not good enough. But it's part of the maturity of the plan too, right? The better you get at identification, containment, eradication, recovery, the more certain you will be that this particular incident that fits these particular characteristics is over. Not to say that there's not another incident occurring that I don't know about yet, but this particular incident, they got in through this way, they used these tools, they propagated in this manner. All of our threat hunting has confirmed that these particular characteristics are no longer present in the environment. It's over. Not to say that tomorrow there might be another attack from the same attacker, just using a different method, a different vector. That's a separate incident. You know what I mean? So yeah, that is a challenge. It's like, because everything in an incident response feeds off of itself, right? When you talk about identification and then getting into containment, if you got shit identification, you're going to have shit containment. If you have shit containment, you're going to have shit eradication. If you have shit, you know what I mean? That's why another thing why it's really important on your incident response to have an incident response plan, so that you make sure, because they say errors propagate. That's 100% true in an incident response. It's going to propagate all the way through to your conclusions at the end, even to your lessons learned. So yeah.
I'm trying to remember the individual, I think it was he used to be like the CIO for the state of North Dakota. He said, a shit process plus technology just equals.
That's Sean Riley.
Shit. Yeah. So
I was just texting Sean Riley.
Yeah. So if you have a crap process and you just add technology on it, you just have faster crap. I'm like, that pretty much explains it.
Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Indeed.
So yeah, it's awesome, man. It's good. It's great to hear that these are success stories, and they can happen. Not every incident needs to be a disaster. Not every incident needs to be headlines in the news. Not every incident needs to be a negative thing. But this is an incident where you planned properly. You had, I think, good identification up front, right? Situational awareness. And still, after all the money we put into technology to try to identify things, anomalies, potential incidents, events in our environments, still far and away, the number one best, I guess, identifier for an incident is going to be a human being.
Absolutely. So, yeah, they see patterns, they see behaviors, they see pop-ups, they see these things that are different than their normal behaviors. And yeah, those are the things we need. We have to have those. And so make that environment so they can report them.
Yeah, and they're by far your best detectors, of incidents that are occurring. And there's that, but there's also, because they're also the easiest one to get through. Most of these attacks start with, social engineering, phishing, trying to get you to do things that open the door for the attacker to come into. You can't, emphasize that enough. But this is a great example where you have an organization that planned ahead, that took a pragmatic approach. You had, good, aware employees who were able to identify early on, follow the right process, which was to notify somebody, get clarification on things. I love these types of incidents because you get all these lessons learned without having to suffer the pain because you planned ahead at the beginning.
Yeah, and I don't think we hear too many.
Kudos.
You don't hear too many, positives come out. You always hear the you don't hear the wins. The wins don't make the headlines.
They don't.
Right? They're not scary enough to
You're
reach
making
the
it
news, so to
today
speak.
on this
That's
podcast.
right. Today's the day that
Boom.
we're turning this around.
And as a CvCISO, where this fits, because we've talked about this before, like if you were to hire me as a vCISO or hire, a good CISO, vCISO, in my opinion, and that is opinion, you start with an assessment. You start with understanding the environment, trying to get context of what is going on here. What risks do we have? What risks are acceptable? What risks are not? You work through that process. And as you start building the program, you always emphasize or always bump up in the scale asset management and incident response. Those are super important for you to put priority on building the security program. Asset management, it should be obvious because I can only protect what I know I have. It also helps me to provide context. One of the biggest things we get in incident responses over the years by far is like, we didn't even know that system was there. Crazy that you'd get that. Like, what? You didn't know that the system was here? Yeah. Whose is that? Hell if I know.
Why
But
is this
you
thing
need to
sitting in the
consult
corner catching dust? I don't know.
My God.
That was somebody else's. That was Bob's from 20 years ago. It's still running.
Breach
What the
after
hell?
breach after breach. Little breach, big company, little company. It's the same damn thing. So asset management, incident response. Your job as a vCISO or in information security leadership is to educate your employee, educate the organization, consult the organization to make good information security risk decisions. If you haven't talked about asset management, if you haven't talked about incident response, and you haven't prioritized that, you're doing a disservice. Now, if the leadership doesn't want to do it, ultimately it's their call. So figure out a better way to consult them, figure out a better way to motivate them because it's in their best interest.
Yeah,
absolutely. One of the things that I like about our discussion here that is banging around my mind is that this is a success story and the incident response plan was not perfect. You self-admittedly, like there's lesson learns but you had one. So much could have been wrong. So like, it doesn't have to be perfect. And I love that you stress that in the course too, Evan, a lot of times. Just take a crack at it. Like, it's not going to be perfect. All of the different things that you have to have in place. It's like, just get started on it and you're going to revise it and you're going to learn and stuff, but not having it could be detrimental.
It will be detrimental. It's just a matter of time. You know what I mean? And there's no fear in that. Logic would tell you the same damn thing, right? It's just a matter of time. And I love the fact that you pointed that out too, because there is no perfect incident response plan. Of all the incident response plans I've ever written and my own organizations, my own personal incident response plan, none of them are even close to perfect. I don't even know what the fuck, excuse my language, what the hell perfect is.
Yeah, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, for sure.
Right. So yeah, good for pointing that out. Don't let the intimidation of getting started stop you from doing what you know is the best thing for you to do. Never, So awesome, man.
That's
Any closing words for you guys?
And good people.
Yeah,
right.
For sure. All right. Well, good talk, man. James, I love having you here. Thanks for sharing a positive story. You're a positive guy. So this positive story fits with the positive guy that I know.
Do come back.
I appreciate it.
Come back and visit us.
And if you have any questions, you holler. Like I said, I lived through this and I obtained a battle scar so that I can help others be a better version of themselves. So
I have the privilege of being in the same local CvCISO chapter with this gentleman. And, if you want to start a CvCISO chapter, let us know because it's awesome.
Let us know. All right. Good talk, guys. Have a great weekend.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you much.